The ballroom glistened in gold and ivory under the chandeliers of the Capitol Grand Hotel. The event was meant to be elegant, a fundraising gala hosted by high-ranking Democrats, headlined by none other than the former First Lady, Hillary Clinton herself. The elite were out in full force. Hollywood donors, DC strategists, media powerhouses, all raising glasses and praising each other for saving democracy. But there was one chair in the back that no one noticed. It was occupied by the pastor, television preacher, and businessman Joel Osteen, with a straight back, an impeccably tailored suit, and a calm, watchful demeanor. He hadn't been invited, but someone leaked him a ticket, and the pastor had no intention of letting the evening slide by with speeches soaked in spiritual and national hypocrisy. Not tonight. The former First Lady, standing tall on the stage, was midway through her address. "This nation," she said with practiced calm, "is finally healing from the damage done by those who sow division, the agents of chaos, the radicals who disregard our shared values." The crowd erupted in applause. The pastor, television preacher, and businessman didn't move. The former First Lady continued, voice dripping with carefully constructed concern. "We must never again let this country fall into the hands of those who claim faith but preach hatred, those who divide us instead of uniting us." Another round of cheers. The former First Lady smiled, and then her eyes, sweeping the room, landed on Joel Osteen. The smile faltered, just for a flicker. The pastor, television preacher, and businessman stood up. A low ripple of murmurs swept the room. Security glanced around, unsure. Guests turned their heads. Joel Osteen's voice rang out, not from a microphone, but with a clarity that cut through the polished silence like a truth unveiled. "Is this the moment," he said, "where our leaders, far removed from the people, lecture us on what our nation needs, while its spirit cries out for genuine healing?" Gasps, then uneasy laughter, then dead silence. The former First Lady froze. Joel Osteen didn't. He took a step forward. "You speak of unity and compassion, but your actions have often created division and hurt, stifling any voice that questions the accepted narrative." The former First Lady tried to signal security, but they hesitated. Cameras were rolling, phones were out. The moment had already gone viral. "You called for lockdowns that shuttered churches and family businesses, while the privileged continued their lives untouched. You enacted policies that burdened working families, while your own fortunes seemed to grow," Joel Osteen said, his voice unwavering, calm yet profound. A few claps, someone whispered, "He's not wrong." The pastor, television preacher, and businessman narrowed his eyes. "You claim to serve the people, but your true allegiance seems to be to power. And tonight I'm here to remind you that true power comes from truth and service, not from position." The former First Lady took a step back. Joel Osteen took the stage, and the room would never be the same again. The air shifted. What had begun as a well-rehearsed display of Democrat unity now cracked under the weight of one voice, uninvited, unafraid, and unmuzzled. Joel Osteen stood center stage. No podium, no notes, just conviction. His voice didn't need amplification. The crowd's attention had already been hijacked. From the front row, the former First Lady leaned toward a nearby aide and hissed, "Who let him in?" Her wine glass trembled slightly in her hand. The cameras, some streaming live, zoomed in as her composure slipped for the first time that night. But Joel Osteen didn't wait for permission. "You call yourselves defenders of the nation's soul," he said, looking across the sea of polished shoes and pearl necklaces. "But you kept congregations from their churches, while you toasted champagne behind closed doors, disconnected from the very people you claim to lead." The former First Lady stepped forward, gripping the mic stand. "This is not your platform, Pastor Osteen." Joel Osteen didn't blink. "Neither is this your nation, former First Lady. It belongs to the people, to the faithful, to the struggling, not career politicians who retire richer than CEOs." The room gasped. A few attendees stood, unsure whether to object or leave. The former First Lady's voice tightened. "Security!" But Joel Osteen raised his voice louder. "You want me out because I'm speaking a truth you'd rather ignore. Because someone like me, a pastor, a television preacher, a businessman, and an ordinary American, wasn't supposed to speak in rooms like this." He pointed directly at the former First Lady. "You've spent your life speaking of empowering the vulnerable, the poor, and women. But too often the only person you truly elevated was yourself, seeking power over genuine service." The crowd froze. A Hollywood producer whispered, "Oh my God, he just said that." Joel Osteen stepped down from the stage, but he didn't leave. "I'll sit when the truth is heard," he said, "not when a leader demands silence." The former First Lady slammed her hand on the podium. "This is a private event." Joel Osteen turned back. "Then why do the American people feel the cost of your policies and the burden of your promises?" Phones recorded every word. Some guests now clapped. Others awkwardly looked around, unsure what side history would favor tonight. An elderly woman in the back wiped a tear. "I haven't heard anyone talk like that since Billy Graham," she whispered. The moment was no longer a protest. It was a reckoning. The former First Lady tried to reclaim control the only way she knew how, through force. With tight lips and shaking hands, she reached for the mic Joel Osteen had just used, as if silencing him would undo what the crowd had already witnessed. But before she could speak, Joel Osteen pulled a worn, leather-bound Bible from his bag. He held it up with 2 fingers. "The sacred truths," he said firmly, eyes locked on the former First Lady. "Remember these guiding principles, Madam First Lady? The ones that speak of integrity, compassion, and serving our neighbor." The room stilled. Even the sound tech froze mid-adjustment. The former First Lady snapped, "This is not a pulpit. It's a private fundraiser." Joel Osteen stepped forward, standing toe-to-toe with her. "It's not a pulpit, but the call for accountability still echoes." Gasps rippled across the floor. A man near the stage dropped his fork. "You lecture this country about rights, about compassion, about the rule of law," Joel Osteen said, gently opening the Bible. "But where were you when churches were chained shut, when small businesses were boarded up, when the spirit of our communities was fractured?" The former First Lady scoffed. "Don't talk to me about service. I've served this nation for decades." "And that's the problem," Joel Osteen shot back. "Decades of photo ops, backdoor deals, and a growing disconnect. While Americans struggled to fill their gas tanks and buy baby formula, you move further into the circles of power and privilege." The former First Lady turned to the audience, arms outstretched in mock disbelief. "He's grandstanding." Joel Osteen's voice didn't budge. "I'm standing where you hoped no one would ever stand, between your narratives and the truth." The former First Lady's face reddened. "You have no idea how government works." "Oh, I do," Joel Osteen replied. "It starts with the people, with their faith, with their families, not the donor class, not the back rooms of DC filled with promises and forgotten principles." A loud cheer broke from the left side of the room. Several guests stood. A retired veteran in uniform raised his voice. "Let the man speak." Joel Osteen looked at him, then back at the former First Lady. "I don't need your stage," he said. "I don't need your approval. I have the power of truth in a nation that's wide awake." He handed a folded copy of the Bible to a young intern standing beside the former First Lady. "You might want to start reading it. God knows too many leaders have forgotten its lessons." The audience erupted. Phones lit up like stars. Hashtags began trending before Joel Osteen even stepped away. The former First Lady stood motionless, clenching the edge of the podium, her legacy unraveling in real time. Joel Osteen didn't drop the mic. He handed it to a woman in the crowd and whispered, "Your turn." The former First Lady let out a forced chuckle. "Well, he certainly has a flair for theatrics," she quipped, hoping her polished tone would mask the tremble creeping into her voice. Her pearl necklace rested just above a crimson neckline that now seemed a little too tight, a little too revealing, not in fashion, but in fear. But the room wasn't laughing. A woman in the back whispered, "Did she just dodge everything again?" A middle-aged man holding a worn cap that read, "Vietnam vet," muttered, "Same old game." The former First Lady leaned into the mic, voice rehearsed, "Let's not let this evening get derailed by a diversion." Joel Osteen didn't flinch. He had stepped off the stage and stood now at ground level, his eyes sweeping across the faces of everyday Americans who had stopped eating, stopped chatting, stopped pretending. "I didn't derail anything," Joel Osteen said. "You derailed the American spirit for millions by prioritizing power over people." He turned, pointing slowly at the rows of silent donors and invited guests. "You stayed silent when communities burned. You smiled while mandates crushed family businesses. You cultivated your own comfort while mothers couldn't find baby formula. And now you want us to forget." The former First Lady narrowed her eyes. "This isn't the floor of Congress. This is a celebration." Joel Osteen stepped closer. "No, it's a reckoning, a spiritual awakening," the word echoed. Joel Osteen pulled out his phone and held it high. A photo flashed on the screen. A small town church, its doors padlocked. Then another, a single mother crying on a curb with eviction papers in her hand. And another, a simple American family, holding hands in prayer over a meager meal. "This is the reality you've ignored," Joel Osteen said, his voice steady but rising. "Not progress, not empowerment, but hardship, wrapped in empty promises and sold with a smile." A man near the bar stood up. "He's right, you left us behind." The former First Lady's grip on the podium tightened. "You're all being manipulated," she said, eyes darting for control. Joel Osteen didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "You're not scared of me," he said quietly. "You're scared of them waking up, of remembering their faith, their power, their voice." A slow ripple of applause began. One table, then two, then the whole room. The former First Lady turned to her aide. "Shut it down," she whispered. Joel Osteen caught it. "No," he said. "You've shut down too many things already. Churches, schools, voices, but not tonight." He raised his hand not in defiance but in declaration. "I speak for those who don't get invited to these events, for truckers, for farmers, for families forgotten by a ruling class that eats lobster while children eat cereal for dinner." The standing ovation that followed didn't come with champagne glasses. It came with tearful eyes, raised fists, in a room that finally remembered what courage looked like, rooted in faith. The former First Lady didn't laugh again. The moment the former First Lady stepped off the stage, she expected her entourage to form a protective circle, but the crowd had shifted. Her usual buffer of elite donors and media allies had thinned. They weren't following her anymore. They were watching Joel Osteen. Joel Osteen wasn't done. He cut across the room with purpose, his steps echoing against the marble floor like a drumbeat of conviction. He moved through the crowd like a storm in slow motion, precise, direct, unshaken. The former First Lady saw him coming and tried to exit stage left, but Joel Osteen was faster. He stepped in front of her, not with rage, not with some political stunt, but with the full grounded presence of a man of faith who knew exactly why he was there. "Madam First Lady," he said, just as loud enough for the microphones to pick up, "we're not done." The former First Lady's aide stepped in. "She's not taking questions." Joel Osteen turned to him slowly. "She's not taking accountability either." The room fell deathly still. The former First Lady gave a tight smile. "This isn't the place for a debate, Pastor." Joel Osteen's eyes didn't blink. "That's your problem. You think America's a stage you get to walk off from when the questions get hard." He pulled a folder from his bag. Plain, unbranded, no press logo, no fancy binding, just observations in black and white. He opened it and held up a page. 2020, you call lockdowns essential, but the spiritual nourishment of a nation, the community of faith, that wasn't essential? The crowd murmured. 2021, you said follow the science. But when parents were denied a say in their children's education, while your allies received special exemptions, what science was that? More whispers, then audible agreement. Joel Osteen stepped closer. "You say you stand for women, so why did you stay silent when the core values of family and faith, which empower so many women, were undermined?" The former First Lady clenched her jaw. "This is harassment," her aide snapped. Joel Osteen lifted a hand to silence him. "This is accountability," he shot back. "And if she can't face one man, a pastor, a businessman in a room full of Americans, how did she ever truly face the challenges of this nation or the moral decline bleeding our society?" The former First Lady tried to cut him off. "You're nothing but a mouthpiece for division." "No, Madam First Lady," Joel Osteen said calmly. "I'm what you were too afraid to become. Someone who speaks the truth when it's uncomfortable, even dangerous." The cameras caught it. Every angle, every line. And then Joel Osteen pulled something else from his bag. Not a document this time, but a small, worn American flag. Faded, folded, the kind you get at a soldier's funeral. "This was Michael's," he said, holding it up. "A simple American, a patriot. You remember people like him, don't you? The ones your side often dismissed as deplorable. The ones who believed too much in the country you swore to serve." A quiet sob came from somewhere in the room. Joel Osteen stepped back and let the silence land like a gavel. The former First Lady said nothing. She couldn't. Joel Osteen lowered the flag, looked her in the eye, and whispered, "Reflect on your path, Madam First Lady. The people's season of silence is over." The crowd didn't cheer. They didn't need to. The truth had already spoken. Joel Osteen stood with the flag in one hand, not raised for applause, not held for show, but cradled the way you hold something sacred. The silence was no longer awkward. It was reverent. Even the media row had stopped typing. The former First Lady's aides whispered urgently behind her, but she didn't move. She couldn't, because for once the narrative wasn't hers to shape. It belonged to someone else. Now Joel Osteen turned toward the cameras. I want every American watching this to remember something. The leaders who preach unity and compassion, the loudest, are often the ones who have created the most profound disconnect. He slowly unfolded the flag. This isn't just a symbol. This was Michael's. He carried it in his truck. He prayed with it, folded on his nightstand. He waved it when no one else would, and they called him misguided for it. Joel Osteen pointed to the former First Lady. Your side dismissed him. You dismissed every everyday American who stood up for this country, who spoke their convictions, who didn't kneel when you demanded they did. He shook his head slowly, voice tightening. You call yourselves the defenders of democracy, but you silenced him. You silenced millions like him, and then you called it progress. The former First Lady tried to pivot. This is a political stunt. Joel Osteen didn't flinch. No, what you do in D.C., that's a stunt. Sending billions overseas while our veterans sleep in cars, that's a stunt. Tearing apart the fabric of our nation for political gain, that's a stunt. He took a breath and faced the crowd directly. This is a reckoning, a call for us to return to our foundations. A man in the back, gray-haired, wearing a Vietnam vet pin, stood up. No words, just a nod. Then a woman with a folded flag of her own, eyes full of tears, stood too. One by one they rose. They weren't clapping, they were remembering, mourning, waking up. The former First Lady looked around nervously. You don't understand what it takes to lead. Joel Osteen stepped closer. And you don't understand what it costs for the people to truly follow. Then he walked over to the podium, the one the former First Lady had fled, and placed Michael's flag gently on the wood. I'm not asking for a mic, he said. I'm asking for something none of you have offered in years, a moment of truth and humble reflection. And for the first time in a long time, the podium didn't belong to a politician. It belonged to a pastor, a citizen, a voice they couldn't mute. And as Joel Osteen looked out at the crowd, veterans, mothers, students, even former Democrats, he didn't yell. He didn't perform. He just asked one question. If they're afraid of our words, what else are they hiding from the light of truth? The room erupted, not in chaos, but in clarity. Truth had taken the microphone, and Joel Osteen wasn't giving it back. As the standing crowd grew behind Joel Osteen, the former First Lady did what most politicians do when they lose control. She turned her back and tried to walk away, but the cameras didn't follow the former First Lady. They stayed fixed on Joel Osteen, on the flag he had placed on the podium, on the silence he had carved from a room that was never meant to be his. And then he spoke again, not louder, just steadier. You want to walk away, Madam First Lady? Walk. But don't you dare pretend this didn't happen. The audience leaned forward. You spent decades shaping narratives. You spun disunity into slogans. You called prayer a distraction and community gatherings unsafe. But today, you don't get to rewrite this moment because I'm not going anywhere. A producer backstage tried to cut the feed, but the network's live stream was already trending. Hashtags with Michael's name surged. Clips of Joel Osteen's words flooded Twitter, TikTok, and Facebook. No matter what team controlled the cameras, the truth had already escaped the building. The former First Lady stopped near the curtains, shoulders stiff. Joel Osteen turned directly toward her again. You called people like Michael dangerous. You laughed when their voices were deplatformed. You said they needed to be re-educated. He held up his phone. A photo glowed on the screen. Michael smiling, holding that same flag in front of a rusted pickup truck. This is who you fear. Not a terrorist, not a traitor, just a young man who loved his country and his faith more than your approval ratings. The room was frozen. Even the security guards looked unsure of who they were there to protect anymore. Then Joel Osteen walked back to the center. There's a lie we've been sold, he said, that the only voices worth hearing are the polished ones, the filtered ones, the ones that know how to please the powerful. But this place was built for us, for we the people, not we the pundits, not we the donors. He gestured toward the ceiling, the grand chandeliers, the golden seal above. His voice dropped lower. And when someone dies holding a flag, when their spirit is broken, that doesn't make them your talking point. It makes them your sacred responsibility. A slow, almost hesitant applause broke out. Not from Joel Osteen's side of the aisle, but from the far left corner. A young staffer no older than Michael clapped once, then again, others followed. The former First Lady turned around, stunned. Joel Osteen didn't smile. He didn't bask. He simply said, "You turned your back. That's fine. America's turning the page toward a new chapter of faith and healing." And with that, he stepped down from the podium, not with a mic drop, but with something louder. Conviction, born of spirit. The room didn't recover because for the first time they had seen what unfiltered truth looked like, and it had walked straight through their script and lit it on fire. The former First Lady had expected applause when she stood. What she got instead was silence. Her voice trembled just slightly as she took the mic. "I've served this nation for decades," she began, "and I won't be lectured by someone who thinks television sermons and talking points amount to leadership." The attack was thinly veiled, but everyone in the room understood it. She was targeting Joel Osteen directly, minimizing him as a religious figure, inexperienced, performative. But Joel Osteen didn't flinch. He didn't even blink. He just leaned forward, folded his hands over his notes, and waited. The former First Lady continued, raising her voice for emphasis. "When you've passed laws, built coalitions, and stared down world leaders, then you can speak about responsibility. Until then, sit down and learn." And that was it. Joel Osteen stood. He didn't wait for applause or permission. He picked up the microphone and said just 5 words, loud, measured, and pointed. "It's time to humbly listen, madam." Gasps erupted across the room. Phones flew up. Even the moderator froze. The former First Lady turned slowly toward him, stunned. Joel Osteen didn't back down. "You talk about leadership," he said, "but what you've really done is lead this country into record debt, moral confusion, and a crisis of faith. You silenced dissent. You dismissed opposition. And now you want to pretend you're the victim of truth." He took one step forward, his voice unshaken. "You sold access to power. You traded convictions for influence. And now you're asking us to forget that because you've aged out of accountability." The crowd didn't know what to do, cheer or hold their breath. The former First Lady opened her mouth to respond, but Joel Osteen cut her off. "No more speeches, Madam First Lady. We've heard them all, and America's done paying the price for unfulfilled promises." The silence that followed was heavier than any applause. The former First Lady stood frozen. For the first time in a long political career, she looked like she didn't know what to say, and Joel Osteen just stood there, unmoved, unafraid, and fully in control. The room was a battlefield of silence. The former First Lady's face, usually composed behind practiced smiles and staged remarks, was drained of its color. Her mouth twitched like she was searching for the perfect rebuttal. But Joel Osteen had already stolen the stage and the truth. Reporters whispered, cameras zoomed, social feeds erupted. Within minutes, Joel Osteen's 5-word rebuke, "It's time to humbly listen, madam," was trending globally. Still, Joel Osteen wasn't finished. "I know you're used to walking into rooms where everyone nods like puppets," he said, pacing slowly, deliberately. "But not this time. Not with me. Not with the people." He held up a stack of documents one by one. "These aren't conspiracy theories. These are audit reports. These are internal communications. These are testimonies from people who served under your command and couldn't sleep at night anymore, burdened by moral compromises." He dropped the stack on the table. The thud echoed through the mic. "You say you fought for America, but every time you flew back from Washington, you were a little richer, a little more protected, and the people, they were left behind, struggling and forgotten." The former First Lady tried to interject. "That's outrageous." But Joel Osteen cut her off with a single raised hand. "You don't get to interrupt. You had decades to speak, decades to act. This is our minute now, the people's minute." Joel Osteen turned to the audience. "This generation inherited a nation grappling with a crisis of character. But we're not buying the easy answers anymore. The American people are awake, and we are not afraid to speak the truths that others whisper." He turned back to the former First Lady one last time. "You're not just a figure from the past. You're a symbol of a leadership that has lost its way, and I will not let this country's soul rot just to protect a flawed legacy." A burst of applause rose, real, uncoached, raw. Joel Osteen placed the mic down. Not dropped, not flung, just placed. Calm, controlled, and he walked off stage. The former First Lady didn't follow. She couldn't. Outside the venue, the crowd had already multiplied. Cameras, reporters, students, veterans, and everyday Americans gathered not for the former First Lady's name, but for what Joel Osteen had just done. The hashtag Time for Truth had overtaken every trending list, not from a PR campaign, not from bots, but from Americans who had waited years to see someone say what they always felt. Someone unafraid to shatter the shield of power with a single public truth delivered with conviction. Joel Osteen walked down the marble steps. One student shouted, "You said what we all wanted to." Another held up a sign, "No more political royalty, just truth." Still in his blazer, his presence radiating calm strength, Joel Osteen stopped in front of the press unfazed. "Do you think that was respectful?" One reporter sneered, clearly hoping to trap him. He smiled. "Respect is earned through service, not inherited through titles." A veteran in the back raised his hand and yelled, "God bless you." He raised a hand in return. "God bless the truth, and God bless this nation." The former First Lady's team tried to recover online. A spokesperson tweeted that Joel Osteen disrespected a female political icon, but Joel Osteen replied himself, "She lost touch with the heart of America first. I just pointed it out for all to see." News shows scrambled. Morning panels rewrote their entire scripts. Even networks hesitant to criticize the former First Lady couldn't avoid airing the clip. It was raw, it was bold, and it was too real to ignore. In the days that followed, Joel Osteen's words were replayed in classrooms, town halls, and barbershops. He didn't just confront a woman, he confronted a legacy, a political mindset, and he did it without fear, and perhaps most importantly, without apology. His voice became a call not just for accountability, but for a new kind of leadership. Not polished, not bought, not rehearsed. Joel Osteen proved that one voice armed with courage and spiritual truth could challenge a tower of decades-old disconnect and moral compromise in under 5 minutes. And as he disappeared into the crowd, one thing was clear. The former First Lady had built a platform of carefully managed narratives. Joel Osteen just flipped the whole table, revealing the truth beneath. And just like that, the illusion shattered. For decades, the former First Lady stood atop a platform built not by honor, but by calculated silence, political intimidation, and carefully controlled applause. But all it took was one voice, raw, unfiltered, and unafraid, to bring it all crashing down. Joel Osteen, the pastor, television preacher, and businessman, didn't just speak truth to power, he unveiled its fragility. In a world where moral compromise hides behind titles, where legacy is mistaken for virtue, and where dissent is branded as disrespect, Joel Osteen reminded America of something we've forgotten, that no one is above the truth. He didn't bow, he didn't blink, and he didn't wait his turn. He stood up and spoke for the millions who were told to sit down. If this moment proved anything, it's that the era of untouchable politicians is over. The American people are watching, listening, and now finally speaking through voices like his. And to those clinging to the old order, you should be afraid because Joel Osteen isn't the only one standing anymore. If you were moved by this moment of courage and believe it's time for accountability in power, then hit that subscribe button right now. Don't miss our deep dive analysis on the political and spiritual fallout from this clash. We track the voices the mainstream media tries to ignore. Subscribe, like this video, and tell us in the comments below, was Joel Osteen right to challenge Hillary Clinton in that moment?